Every culture on Earth has had to answer the same basic question. What should a person do with the resources they manage to accumulate? American consumer culture answered this question in a specific way over the past 70 years, a way optimized for economic growth, retail expansion, and the continuous churn of consumption that keeps a consumption-driven economy running. Spend to signal success. Replace to stay current, borrow against the future to fund the present, display wealth to communicate it, because if no one can see it, what was the point? This is not the only answer humanity has produced. It is not even, by most financial outcome measures, a particularly good one. According to the Federal Reserve's 2024 survey of consumer finances, the median American household has approximately $8,000 in liquid savings. Total American credit card debt crossed $1.28 trillion at the end of 2025. Nearly half of credit card holders carry a balance month to month, paying an average interest rate above 24%. Other cultures, developing their financial philosophies over centuries, and in some cases millennia, arrived at fundamentally different answers. Answers that, when measured against modern financial outcomes like savings rates, debt levels, and financial resilience, consistently outperform the American default. This is not a video about exotic foreign customs presented for curiosity. It is a practical examination of 10 specific money philosophies from around the world, each one battle-tested across generations, each one producing measurably different financial behavior than the American default, and each one translatable into a specific action you can take with your own finances starting this month, regardless of your income or where you live. If you're into this kind of content, take a second to subscribe. And if this video helps you at any point, tap that like button. It really helps the channel. And now, let's get into it. Philosophy 1. Lagom, Sweden's principle of just the right amount. Lagom does not translate cleanly into English, which is itself revealing. The closest approximation is just the right amount. Not too much, not too little, precisely enough. It is the central organizing principle of Swedish culture, applied to everything from portion sizes to home square footage to wardrobe size to vacation spending. Lagom stands in direct opposition to the American cultural instinct toward maximization. The bigger house, the larger portion, the more extensive wardrobe, all justified by the underlying assumption that more is categorically better than enough. The financial application of Lagom is a deliberate calibration exercise applied to every major spending category. Not the cheapest option available, which Lagom would consider as imbalanced as the most expensive, the option that precisely matches genuine need without surplus or deficiency. Sweden's household savings rate has consistently ranked among the highest in the OECD, frequently exceeding 15 to 18% of disposable income, according to OECD data, more than 3 times the American rate of 4.6%. Swedish housing square footage per capita is significantly smaller than American housing square footage. Yet Swedish quality of life rankings consistently place near the top of global indices. The Lagom principle of right-sized consumption, not minimalism, not deprivation, precisely enough, produces financial margin that the American maximization instinct consistently consumes. The American application of Lagom starts with a single question applied to every significant purchase. Is this the amount I genuinely need, or is this more than I need justified by the assumption that more is automatically better? The household evaluating a home purchase asks whether 2,800 square feet is genuinely required for their family size and lifestyle, or whether 2,000 square feet would be Lagom, precisely enough, while the difference in mortgage payment, property tax, utilities, and furnishing cost compounds into significant wealth over decades. Philosophy 2. Jugaad, India's philosophy of resourceful improvisation. Jugaad is a Hindi term describing a specific kind of resourceful, frugal innovation, the practice of solving problems with available resources rather than purchasing new solutions, of repairing and repurposing rather than replacing, of finding the workaround that achieves the functional outcome without the expenditure that a conventional solution would require. Indian household savings rates have historically ranked among the highest in the world. The Reserve Bank of India has documented household savings rates exceeding 20 to 30% of disposable income in various periods, a figure that dwarfs Western comparisons. Jugaad is not the only explanation for this. Cultural emphasis on extended family financial support, lower social safety net dependence, and specific savings goals tied to events like weddings all contribute. But the Jugaad mindset, the instinct to solve rather than purchase, is a measurable behavioral contributor that translates directly into American financial application. The Jugaad approach to a broken household item is repair, repurpose, or improvise a solution using existing resources before considering replacement as the default response. The Jugaad approach to a problem that seems to require a purchased solution is asking whether an existing possession, used creatively, could solve it instead. The Jugaad approach to a service that seems necessary is asking whether the underlying need could be met through a skill, a relationship, or a creative reallocation of existing resources rather than a new transaction. American consumer culture defaults to purchased solutions for nearly every problem: a new product, a new service, a new subscription for nearly every friction point in daily life. The research on this default is documented extensively in the convenience economy literature. Americans spend significant premiums on solutions that resourceful improvisation could provide at a fraction of the cost. The financial impact of adopting a Jugaad orientation toward problem solving is difficult to quantify in a single number because it applies across every spending category rather than one specific behavior. But households that report practicing deliberate resourcefulness, repairing before replacing, repurposing before purchasing, solving before buying, consistently report meaningfully lower discretionary spending without corresponding reductions in functional quality of life. Philosophy 3. Sparsamkeit, Germany's cultural value of frugality, thrift, and careful, deliberate spending, a value so deeply embedded in German cultural identity that it shapes national fiscal policy debates as much as household budgeting. Germany's household savings rate has consistently been among the highest in the Eurozone, frequently exceeding 10 to 11%, according to Die Status, the German Federal Statistics Office, more than double the American rate. German consumer debt levels are dramatically lower than American levels relative to income. German cultural attitudes toward debt, captured in the German word for debt, Schuld, which shares an etymological root with Schuld, meaning guilt, reflect a genuinely different psychological relationship with borrowed money than American culture's largely neutral or even positive framing of debt as a financial tool. Sparsamkeit produces specific observable financial behaviors. German consumers are documented in comparative retail research as significantly more price-sensitive and comparison-driven than American consumers. The German discount grocery model, pioneered by Aldi and Lidl, succeeded domestically before it succeeded internationally, precisely because German consumer culture rewarded the value proposition these stores offered in a way that took American consumers, accustomed to a different relationship with grocery pricing, longer to fully embrace. The American application of Sparsamkeit is the deliberate cultivation of price sensitivity as a positive value rather than a marker of financial strain. comparison shopping not as an embarrassing necessity for people who can't afford better, but as a Sparsamkeit value practiced by people across income levels who have decided that careful, deliberate spending is simply correct behavior, regardless of what they can afford. This reframe matters because American social pressure frequently treats price sensitivity as evidence of financial inadequacy. Sparsamkeit treats it as evidence of financial wisdom practiced by choice, not necessity. Philosophy 4. Guanxi-Based Long-Term Thinking, China's Multi-Generational Wealth Horizon. Chinese financial culture, particularly as it relates to long-term wealth building, operates on a fundamentally different time horizon than American financial culture. Where American financial planning typically extends to an individual's retirement, a horizon of perhaps 40 to 50 years from young adulthood, traditional Chinese financial philosophy frequently extends across generations, with wealth-building decisions made not just for the current decision-maker's benefit, but for children, grandchildren, and the extended family network. China's household savings rate has been among the highest in the world for decades, frequently exceeding 30 to 35% of disposable income, according to World Bank data, a figure that reflects both structural factors, limited social safety net, one-child policy legacy effects on retirement planning, and cultural factors rooted in multi-generational wealth thinking. The multi-generational horizon changes the calculus of present financial decisions in specific ways. A purchase evaluated only against its impact on the current decision-maker's life feels justified more easily than the same purchase evaluated against its impact on the family's wealth trajectory across multiple future generations. The $40,000 spent on a wedding feels different when evaluated as money spent on one day of my life versus money that could have seeded a child's eventual home down payment or a grandchild's education fund. This is not a suggestion that every financial decision should be subordinated to descendants who don't yet exist. It is a specific cognitive reframe, extending the time horizon against which financial decisions are evaluated beyond the individual lifetime, that produces measurably more conservative, more wealth-preserving decisions in research on intergenerational financial planning. American households that explicitly adopt a multi-generational planning horizon, setting up custodial investment accounts for children at birth, establishing 529 education savings plans early, structuring estate planning decades before they become urgent, consistently demonstrate higher wealth accumulation than households planning only against their own retirement horizon, according to research from Vanguard and Fidelity on intentional long-horizon savers. Philosophy 5. Ubuntu Economics, Southern Africa's Communal Wealth Resilience Model. Ubuntu is a Southern African philosophical concept most associated with Zulu and Xhosa cultural traditions, often translated as "I am because we are," the principle that individual well-being is inextricably connected to communal well-being, and that resources, including financial resources, exist within a web of mutual obligation and support rather than purely individual accumulation. The financial application of Ubuntu has been documented extensively in research on rotating savings and credit associations, informal community-based savings groups known by various names across Africa, including Stokvels in South Africa, in which members contribute a fixed amount regularly to a shared pool with the full pooled amount distributed to a different member on a rotating schedule. These structures provide access to lump sum capital for major expenses, education, home improvement, business investment, without requiring formal credit access or interest payments, while simultaneously enforcing savings discipline through social accountability. South African stokvels collectively hold an estimated $3.4 billion in savings, according to the National Stokvel Association of South Africa. Informal financial infrastructure operating entirely outside formal banking, sustained purely by social trust and Ubuntu-based mutual obligation. The American application of Ubuntu economics is the deliberate construction of financial accountability networks, saving circles among trusted friends or family that combine the structural commitment device of a stokvel, the social pressure of regular contribution to a shared goal, with the explicit financial transparency that American culture's money taboo typically prevents. A group of friends committing to a shared monthly savings challenge, reporting progress to each other, creates exactly the kind of social accountability that research on behavior change consistently identifies as one of the most reliable mechanisms for sustaining difficult financial habits. Borrowed directly from a financial philosophy that has sustained savings behavior across generations, without any of the institutional infrastructure Americans assume savings requires. Philosophy 6. Hyggelig Restraint. Denmark's comfort without consumption. Denmark consistently ranks among the world's happiest countries in the World Happiness Report, while maintaining one of the highest tax burdens and most redistributive economic systems among wealthy nations, a combination that challenges the American cultural assumption that happiness requires high disposable income and extensive consumer choice. Hygge, the Danish concept of cozy, contented comfort, most associated with candles, blankets, and intimate gatherings, is frequently marketed in American contexts as an aesthetic to purchase. Hygge candles, Hygge home goods, Hygge decor collections. This commercialization fundamentally misunderstands the concept. Authentic Hygge is achieved through presence, simplicity, and intimate connection, not through the acquisition of specific consumer products marketed under the Hygge label. The financial lesson embedded in genuine Hygge practice is that the emotional state Americans frequently attempt to purchase, coziness, comfort, contentment, connection, is achievable through behaviors that cost little to nothing: a home-cooked meal shared with close friends, an evening without screens, a walk in cold weather followed by warm tea. Danish households spend significantly less on entertainment and leisure relative to income than American households, according to OECD comparative consumption data, while reporting higher life satisfaction scores, suggesting that the relationship between leisure spending and leisure satisfaction that American marketing assumes is considerably weaker than advertised. The American application of Hyggelig restraint requires separating the genuine emotional need, connection, comfort, restoration, from the consumer product that American marketing has attached to it. The candle does not produce Hygge. The unhurried evening with people you care about, regardless of what's burning on the table, produces Hygge. Identifying and meeting the actual emotional need directly, rather than through the commercial proxy marketed as the solution, is the financial habit Hyggelig restraint teaches. Philosophy 7. Pakikisama and Bayanihan, the Philippines' mutual aid financial networks. Bayanihan, the Filipino tradition of communal unity and mutual aid, historically referred to entire communities literally carrying a family's house to a new location together. Its modern financial application persists in extensive informal lending and mutual aid networks that Filipino households maintain both within the Philippines and within Filipino diaspora communities globally. The Philippines has one of the world's most extensive remittance economies. Overseas Filipino workers sent home approximately $38 billion in 2024, according to the Philippine Central Bank, representing one of the largest remittance flows globally relative to the size of the domestic economy. This system operates on a foundation of Bayanihan-style trust, the expectation of mutual obligation across extended family and community networks that makes informal, interest-free lending and support systems function reliably without formal contractual enforcement. Filipino household financial planning frequently incorporates explicit expectation of mutual support, both giving and receiving, across an extended network larger than the nuclear family unit that American financial planning typically assumes. This produces a specific resilience. A household facing a temporary crisis has access to a support network that doesn't require high-interest credit, while a household in a position to help has a cultural expectation that doing so is appropriate, rather than an unusual imposition. American households, operating within a cultural framework that emphasizes nuclear family financial independence and treats extended family financial involvement as awkward or inappropriate, frequently lack this resilience layer, which is part of why 57% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency from savings, according to Bankrate research, despite many having extended family networks that, under a Bayanihan-style cultural framework, would represent accessible support. The application is not financial dependency, but the deliberate cultivation of mutual aid relationships, explicit conversations with trusted family about mutual support expectations before a crisis makes the conversation urgent and awkward.
Philosophy 8. Janteloven, Scandinavia's anti-status social contract. Janteloven, most associated with Danish and Norwegian culture, is an unwritten social code discouraging individual boasting and a conspicuous display of success or wealth relative to one's community. The Jant Law, articulated in a 1933 Danish novel, but reflecting much older Scandinavian cultural norms, holds that no one should consider themselves better than anyone else, and that flaunting individual success is socially unacceptable regardless of how legitimately it is earned. This is the most direct cultural opposite of American status display consumer culture available on this list, where American social norms frequently reward visible success, the impressive car, the upgraded home, the documented vacation. Janteloven actively punishes the same behaviors with social disapproval. The financial consequence is measurable. Status signaling consumption, the specific category of spending that exists primarily to communicate financial position to others, rather than to provide direct functional or experiential value, is significantly suppressed in cultures operating under Janteloven-style norms. Scandinavian countries consistently demonstrate lower income to luxury goods spending ratios than comparable income populations in countries without similar anti-status norms, according to comparative luxury market research. The financial energy that American culture channels into visible consumption gets redirected under Janteloven into the savings and investment behavior that produces Scandinavia's significantly higher savings rates. The American application of Janteloven cannot replicate an entire society's social contract, but it can be applied at the individual and household level. The deliberate decision to evaluate purchases against genuine personal value rather than status communication, and the deliberate construction of social circles, friend groups, professional networks, where status signaling consumption is not the implicit currency of belonging. Research on social comparison and spending consistently shows that the financial behavior of your immediate social circle is among the strongest predictors of your own spending behavior. Curating that circle toward Janteloven-style values produces measurably different individual financial outcomes.
Philosophy 9. Sisu, Finland's philosophy of Stoic endurance applied to finance. Sisu is a Finnish concept describing a particular kind of stoic, determined resilience, the capacity to endure hardship, maintain discipline through difficulty, and persist without complaint through circumstances that would reasonably justify giving up. It is most often discussed in the context of physical and psychological endurance, but its financial application is equally significant and considerably less examined. Financial sisu is the capacity to maintain a savings and investment strategy through periods when doing so feels genuinely difficult, market downturns that make continued contribution feel pointless, lifestyle pressure from peers that makes restraint feel sacrificial, the multi-year stretch where the compounding hasn't yet produced visible results, and the strategy feels like faith rather than progress. Finland consistently ranks among the world's happiest countries while maintaining one of the more financially disciplined populations in Scandinavia. Finnish household debt-to-income ratios, while elevated by some measures to specific mortgage market structures, are managed with documented discipline around consumer debt specifically, with Finnish consumers maintaining notably lower revolving credit card debt relative to income. The financial application of Sisu is the explicit cultivation of endurance as a financial virtue, not the absence of difficulty, but the capacity to continue the difficult behavior anyway. The investor who maintains contributions through a 30% market decline is practicing financial sisu. The household that maintains its savings rate through a friend group's lifestyle inflation is practicing financial sisu. The person who continues debt elimination through the 18th month, when the 18th month feels exactly as hard as the first, is practicing financial sisu. American financial culture, saturated with messaging about ease, optimization, and hacks that promise results without difficulty, has little cultural language for the simple fact that sustained wealth building requires enduring difficulty that doesn't go away. Sisu provides that language, the explicit naming of endurance as a value worth cultivating deliberately, rather than an unfortunate obstacle that better techniques should eliminate.
Philosophy 10. Wu Wei, the Daoist principle of effortless action applied to automated wealth building. Wu Wei, a foundational concept in Daoist philosophy, is often translated as effortless action or non-action, not laziness or passivity, but the specific wisdom of allowing natural processes to unfold without excessive interference, of acting in harmony with the system's natural tendencies rather than constantly forcing outcomes through continuous active effort. The financial application of Wu Wei is the recognition that the most effective wealth-building systems are the ones that require the least ongoing active management, the automated investment contribution that executes without requiring a monthly decision, the diversified indexed fund that grows through the market's natural tendency toward long-term appreciation, without requiring active stock selection. The financial system designed once and then left alone to operate according to its own internal logic, rather than constantly adjusted through active intervention. This is, in fact, one of the most rigorously documented findings in modern investment research. Dalbar's quantitative analysis of investor behavior has found for decades that the average investor underperforms the market index they're invested in by approximately 2 to 3% annually, not because of poor investment selection, but because of excessive activity, selling during downturns, buying during peaks, adjusting allocations based on news and emotion, rather than allowing the Wu Wei principle of effortless, undisturbed growth to operate rather than being interfered with.
The American cultural instinct, particularly around money, tends toward the opposite of Wu Wei. The belief that good outcomes require constant active management, that checking the portfolio frequently demonstrates appropriate diligence, that reacting to market news represents responsible engagement, rather than the behavioral interference that consistently destroys returns. The Wu Wei application to American personal finance is specific and actionable. Build the system once, the automated contributions, the diversified, low-cost index fund allocation, the savings transfer that executes without requiring a decision, and then practice the deliberate discipline of leaving it alone. Not checking daily, not reacting to news, not adjusting because adjustment feels like productive engagement. The system, left to operate according to its natural tendency toward long-term compound growth, produces better outcomes than the system constantly interfered with by an investor convinced that activity equals diligence. 10 philosophies, 10 cultures, 10 different paths to the same destination. Genuine financial security built through behaviors that have nothing to do with income level and everything to do with the underlying relationship between a person and their resources. Lagom calibrates consumption to genuine need rather than maximization. Jugaad solves problems through resourcefulness rather than purchase. Sparsamkeit makes frugality a positive value rather than a marker of constraint. The Chinese multi-generational horizon extends financial evaluation beyond the individual lifetime. Ubuntu economics builds financial resilience through community rather than pure individual accumulation. Hyggelig restraint finds genuine comfort without commercial mediation. Bayanihan creates mutual aid networks that provide resilience without formal credit. Janteloven removes the social reward for status signaling consumption. Sisu provides the language for enduring the difficulty that sustained wealth building requires. And Wu Wei recognizes that the best financial systems are the ones designed once and then left alone. None of these philosophies require abandoning American identity or adopting a foreign culture wholesale. Each one is a specific behavioral and philosophical tool that has been tested across generations in the culture that developed it, proven against the same fundamental human tendencies toward overconsumption, toward status display, toward short-term thinking, that every culture on Earth has had to manage in its own way. America's answer to these tendencies has been to indulge them, structuring an entire economy around their continuous activation. Other cultures developed different answers, and the financial outcomes, savings rates 3 to 4 times higher, dramatically lower consumer debt, greater financial resilience despite comparable or lower median incomes, speak for themselves. The philosophy you operate by was probably never chosen deliberately. It was absorbed from the culture you were raised in, the same way every person in every culture absorbs theirs. It can be chosen now, deliberately, from any of these 10, or some combination of all of them, applied to a financial life that has been operating, until now, on assumptions that were never actually examined. The examination is where it starts.